I don't care if you like spy movies or not. That is one hell of a theme. Good evening, movie lovers. This is the 411. Jesus Christ. That's going to be a long night. I can already see it, man. Fuck it, we're doing it live. Yo. This is the long road to Hi Sean. How are you?
Hey, Mark.
So you ready to you ready to do this long road to ruin thing?
Before we jump into these two excellent movies of fine character, do you mind if I kind of take the floor for a little bit of personal time for just a second?
Yeah, give me 10 seconds to actually do this the appropriate way, and then the floor is yours. Hello, welcome to the Long Road to Ruin. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified at this start of the show, Mr. Mark Radulich. And of course, joining me is my co-host, as always, the former ringleader of Music 3 R's, Mr. Sean Comer, who will be addressing you in just a moment. He now brings life back to music, so you can check out that column in the Music Zone. And tonight, we will be looking at, in this first of two parts, the first two Mission Impossible movies starring the inimitable Tom Cruise. So we're going to get into all of that and spy action and the difference between spy movies and action movies and where in the Venn diagram they meet in the middle. We're going to get into all of that in just a few moments. But first, here's a word from Sean. Hit it.
Hey, gang. A couple things. First and foremost, on a kind of positive note, you may have noticed that, one thing we didn't say is we're talking about Transformers this week. Due to circumstances beyond our control, we had to put that off, and it's because of those circumstances that I just want to take a moment to wish our good buddy, our good pal, Maestro of the Man Cave, Jeremy Lambert, well. He had some unfortunate personal business that he had to attend to, and so, of course, I told him, take care of business, don't worry about our little show, we're going to hold off this one until we can get to you. Also, this is why we're not doing Bad Movie Review Club tomorrow, so that's going to also be put off a little bit. But when we get back around to that, instead of doing Bones, we are going to be doing Steven Seagal's Against the Night. The Aikido master, the great sensei versus the vampires. That being said, I want to address something about last week. Not because anybody complained about it, but because I developed a little bit of a conscience about it. Last week we discussed Twilight, and when Mark threw it to me to discuss how I kind of came about the franchise, I did something that I should really try not to do, that I do try not. And that is I kind of brought my personal life to work with me. That franchise brought to mind, obviously, as I said last week, my best friend Scarlett, and that brought to mind somebody else. And I took the inappropriate time to say some things that I'm not going to back off of. I'm not going to apologize for feeling the way I do. I'm going to apologize that I brought the tone of the show down briefly, because I should really know better than to bring personal matters like that, and it is very personal, onto the air with me. So, that being said, from here forward, that is the last time you're ever going to hear that individual even vaguely mentioned, even vaguely ever referenced. Because we come here to have a good time. We come here to talk about movies. We come here to get off track from talking about movies to talk about other shit. We don't come here to talk about Sean's personal problems with people. So, that being said, that's it. That's done. And I apologize for my, quite frankly, improper, immature conduct last week.
If it means anything to you, after the podcast was over, I asked Melissa how she felt, and, off air. I know we talked about it on air, but off air, I was like, so really, how did you feel about the whole Twilight discussion? And she was like, well, I like Sean. So she was just like, it's hard to really know people in a situation like that, and the internet has created this sort of weird virtual friends reality where, you know people, but you don't know people. Real life is very, very different from virtual life, obviously. And she was like, well, he seems like a nice guy. And I was like, oh, well, so far so good. So, but of the people that she's been forced to interact with all of my podcasting, she had nothing but good things to say about you, as opposed to some of the other people she has met through my incessant podcasting, who, and those people shall remain nameless, as I do not want to hurt feelings. So take that for what it's worth.
One of those people I'm going to go uncharacteristically easy on, because I noticed how, well, not to be redundant, but how noticeably well-behaved he was Saturday night during your live MMA coverage. So, for that, I shall not take a dig at him as I usually would at this point. But, no, I rather enjoyed having Melissa on the show last week, and she is welcome to come and play in our sandbox anytime she well pleases.
Okay. So we are roughly 8 minutes into this, and we have said nothing except the titles of these two movies. So we are going to go ahead and
I had to get those things off my chest. Those have been weighing on me since 2 weeks ago. So.
That's all I'm saying is let's get to it. All right, so we're going to be talking tonight about Mission Impossible and Mission Impossible 2. And the first Mission Impossible movie came out in 1996. And then 2 weeks we'll be doing Mission Impossible 3 and Ghost Protocol. I have to be honest with listeners right up front, like I was with Paranormal Activities. And when we did Paranormal Activities, I was all theatrical about it, but quite frankly, I'm exhausted. So I'm going to leave the theatrics at home tonight. And I'm just going to come right out and say, Sean, if I may be so bold and honest, I am actually not a huge fan of the spy genre. And if somebody had suggested, why don't you do the Bourne Conundrum franchise, and I was like, yeah, well, I mean, we'll eventually get to it just because I think it's one worth looking at. But, if you were to say, Mark, what kind of movies do you like if you don't like this and you don't like that? I like straight-up action movies where lots of stuff gets blown up. And if I had more time to go to the movies, I would watch more movies where stuff. I mean, I'm one of the few people that went to the movies to go see 2012 or whatever it was, and every other disaster movie that comes up, because I like that sort of thing. I like action movies, but I don't necessarily run to the movies to watch the spy genre. So, the Mission Impossible movies, I was always kind of 50-50 on. And as I told Sean before tonight's broadcast, I've had to watch these multiple times, if only because I keep falling asleep through them. So it's going to be an interesting discussion tonight. Because you might be asking yourself, Jesus Christ, why would you want to talk about these things if you're not a huge fan or you keep falling asleep? And I said, well, because I think as somebody who is a film person, you need to stretch your boundaries and you need to be able to look at things and think about things that maybe are not in your particular wheelhouse. And I don't mind stretching myself a little bit in order to see what is good or what is bad about these movies, objectively. But I do want to talk.
And also because you gave me the option of cancel the show or pick something else, and I decided that I wanted to pick something else.
Right.
And we went with available in its entirety on Netflix.
Pretty much. That was. How did you come upon Mission Impossible? Well, it's all on Netflix. That's why. Dart board. But now let's talk a little bit about that, because I grew up. In as far as spy movies go, the only one I really had any kind of real exposure to was the James Bond series, and I grew up on Roger Moore. Those were the first Bond movies that I saw. Those are the ones that I know the best. And a little bit later in life, we'll forget about the Timothy Dalton one, and we'll move right into Pierce Brosnan. And those are the ones I think I have the deepest affection for. But what ended up happening with the Bond series was they started to drift out of the traditional spy genre and into more of an action movie where your spy is not just a spy anymore. He becomes a superhero, ninja, super soldier fighting force. He can just do anything. And that's kind of where I want to start this discussion. Just in general with spy movies and action movies and spy movies that are also action movies. And that is, I think some of my disinterest in these movies is that they become. I don't know if you've ever seen the Family Guy episode where Peter takes over direction of the King and I, and and when they finally show you his version of it, he was like, "I am a cyborg ninja," and it's just going on and on of all these different things that he is, and that becomes, and to me that's kind of what a lot of the characters are in these movies. At some point, they don't seem fallible. They don't seem vulnerable in any way. They seem to be more superhero than any one of the Marvel superheroes to me. And then it's just watching them do stuff that becomes so highly improbable it takes me out of the movies. So what do you think about that, Sean? I mean, I think that's probably why I had such difficulty warming up to the Mission Impossible franchises. I just didn't want to see Tom Cruise be, Jesus with a spy badge.
Well, to a certain extent, I agree, and I can see where you're coming from, especially when you talk about the evolution of the spy movie genre. What it went through for a long time was it went through a long stretch from about Timothy Dalton onward, wherein you had a period in which James Bond wasn't portrayed by actors who seemed like they could ever realistically be a threat to the bad guys. And by that nature just weren't really that enjoyable or really that authentic the way that Sean Connery and to a greatly lesser extent Roger Moore were. Connery brought a certain bit of believability to it. And when you're talking about a movie wherein it's really focused on the character, and it has to be driven by whoever is playing Bond, that's important. That's an important downfall of those. And you are right. To compensate for that, to compensate for the lack of authenticity, you did have to go through a phrase. My enunciation tonight, zombie Jesus with cupcakes. You had to go through a phase in which he was kind of able to pull out whatever he needed to from his skill set because fuck it, plot says so. You didn't really have one consistent skill set throughout the entire thing. Whereas, on the other hand, with the Mission Impossible movies in particular, you've got movies that, as we'll see as we go along, the movies themselves, first off, directors tend to really star more than Tom Cruise does. They tend to be more important to the look and feel of the movie than his performance. But also, to their credit, you've got Ethan Hunt being really pretty consistent in his style throughout the entire thing. Pretty consistently being not so much somebody who tries to engage hand-to-hand or gun-to-gun directly all the time, but somebody who, as they point out in the second movie, really prefers subterfuge, who prefers misdirection, who prefers to kind of get around a fight.
I really want to talk about that line when we get to Mission Impossible 2, because it's one of my favorite in the movie. But you're absolutely right. I think one of the great things about the first Mission Impossible, the parts that I was awake for, was that for the first time, I had this glaring thought while I was watching the first Mission Impossible. I said, my God, this came out in 1996. It looks like it was shot in 1976. And it's paced about that way. And you really only had one or two really gratuitous action scenes. You have that whole train sequence, which I feel like right now is a big theme in my movie life, where everything I watch has got a big train fight scene. The Wolverine, the Lone Ranger, Mission Impossible. Everybody's fighting on a train. But that was one of the few sequences in the movie that I can recall where it was was over the top action. But because the rest of the movie was, I don't want to say plotting because that's an insult to the movie. You had to watch Ethan Hunt, this is Tom Cruise's character in the movie. You had to watch him think through things, and it was more than just a guy whipping out gadgets and weapons. And he wasn't a ninja. he wasn't Captain America who was able to, fight off an army with his bare hands. It was a guy trying to think through the obstacles that were beset before him, and he had to figure out a puzzle. And I'll tell you, it was something that we brought up during the Batman podcast, that an element that gets lost in the Batman movies oftentimes is that he's not just a superhero, he's a detective. He's the guy in the Batcave figuring things out. How do the puzzle pieces fit together? And I think if more spy movies focused on that and less on the bang, zoom, right in the mouth, Alice, I would probably be into them more, because I do like a thinking man's movie. I mean, I was thinking about this before the podcast started. As I'm sitting here going through the Rolodex of stuff I like, I'm like, Jesus Christ, if I'm listening to me, I'm wondering, why do I even watch movies? I hate almost everything. So what do I do like? I like The Wire. I loved that show. And, now ask me why. Why, Mark? Why did you love The Wire? Well, I love ghetto drug stuff. But aside from that, The Wire was about a puzzle that needed to be figured out by the parties involved. They needed to, they knew, you knew what the end result was going to be. You saw the picture on the box, but you had all of these scattered pieces that you had to somehow fit together in order to get to that picture that you already knew existed, but you got to get there. It's about the journey. And that's the thing that I loved about The Wire was the figuring of things out, which, at least in the first Mission Impossible movie, they do a great job of doing.
If you really like that style that, as you put it, looks like it was shot in 1976 instead of 1996, if you like the fact that it's a thinking man's movie that has an approach of subtlety, you've really got to chalk that up to looking at the two greatest creative assets you had on this and the fact that they each knew how they would be put to best use. First off, your director was Brian De Palma as opposed to John Woo in the second movie, or J.J. Abrams directing Mission Impossible 3, or even Brad Bird directing Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Brian De Palma is not a product of modern action. He is a product of the 70s. This is the man who is a visual stylist. This is the man that brought us Carrie. This is the man that brought us the retooling of Scarface. This is somebody who knows how not to rely on smoke and mirrors to make his point, who has a sense of pacing about his movies, who has a sense of building tension. All you have to do to see that is just look at the famous wire scene in the movie and how it is completely bereft of incidental music. Look at how long the shots are. Look at how they transition at just the right time. Look at how much is done practically in that scene. There's no replacing that sense of style. And then you've got Tom Cruise. You've got the fact that the people who made this movie recognize that Tom Cruise is never, or was not then, has never been, will never be a credible, ass-kicking superhero. He's not.
Which is why I laughed at movies like Jack Reacher.
Well, right, exactly, and that's one of the reasons why that movie is so hard to kind of get on board with, is the fact that, and people can argue this with me up and down all the hell they want to. I will have a million examples of why you were wrong on this. Great action stars have that sense of, and I keep using this word, authenticity. That sense of believability, that sense that whatever you're watching them do on the screen, you believe in that instant that that person is really absolutely 100% capable of pulling that off. You don't have to suspend your disbelief like you do watching the toothpick arms of Carrie Ann Moss knock out people a good head taller than her like she's fucking Mike Tyson. Or to believe that Keanu Reeves could really wipe out a room full of highly trained commandos, or that Leonardo DiCaprio is going to strike pants-crapping fear into absolutely anybody. No. This movie, they didn't try to play Cruise up that way. They made Ethan Hunt, as I said, a master of subterfuge. Somebody who doesn't necessarily worry about piling up a massive body count and leaving a trail of blood in his wake. It's believable because looking at Cruise, you absolutely believe no matter what movie he's in that, yes, this is somebody that would be better served trying to be evasive, trying to get around confrontation. And it works here. It works in scenes where you see him utilizing agility or smarts or planning or strategy.
I love the reveals with the face masks, the costumes. You know, it's a great spy meme. And it looks really, I mean, especially they do it so dramatically. You know, he reaches down from underneath his chin and just rips his face away.
Right. Well, right. But you mentioned the Bond movies too, though. That is the difference. Guys like Connery, Craig, to a far lesser extent Roger Moore, they're convincing in that kind of brutality. If they had maybe taken the opposite route with Timothy Dalton, George Lazenby, and Pierce Brosnan, and made them those kind of smooth masters of evading confrontation, or maybe just even making better use of the gadgets than necessarily hand-to-hand combat or gunplay, they might have been a little more believable. They might have been a little bit better. Granted, certain things about the movies would still be fucking stupid, but they would be fucking stupid in that kind of entertaining way that other Bond movies are fucking stupid.
Well, hang on. Let me draw a distinction here. If you're going to do a movie in which one man can kill off an army of trained and armed folks in whatever genre we're talking about, cowboys, ninjas, whatever, then you almost have to go the Quentin Tarantino route, where it's so over the top, it's ridiculous. But it's ridiculous to the point where you can have fun with it. You can't. It's something that we've talked about in other podcasts, and it really, really, it's a big element, I think, of this discussion, in that you have to know what it is your movie is going to be. If it's going to be a spy movie, you can't have a superhero killing off an army full of people in the same world that you've created these other things where there's more subtlety going on. However, if you're going to do a movie where you're going to kill off an entire army full of people with one guy, then go ahead and do that. But it has to be ridiculous the entire way around. You know, there's a consistency in tone that I'm looking for with these movies that I think many times is absent.
You know what? I could beg to differ on that slightly to a very small extent when bringing up the Bourne movies, but then I've almost got to correct myself and point out that Matt Damon notoriously went to great lengths to whip himself into shape for those movies.
A midget is still a midget, even if he's ripped.
Yes, he is. However, you could also argue that he was more ripped and more convincing doing in his movies than Cruise probably would have been doing that in these. And also, sometimes some people, some movies with some writers and some directors can manage to get away with something that ordinarily really shouldn't work. It doesn't mean that everybody can do it. Damon managed to pull it off, and I think that's owed in part to the fact that in the Bourne movies, there's always that sense of Bourne is never completely sure how he knows how to do this stuff. He just does. It's just a part of his sleeper cell training, which, okay, fair play. It's that same kind of convenience that will let other people throw back at me the Carrie-Anne Moss comparison that I just made.
I was going to say it's also cheap and lazy, but we'll get to that when we ever get to the Bourne Conundrum series. Let's get back to Mission Impossible and why especially the first movie, it works so well. And you were talking about Brian De Palma and his style, which was he wasn't trying to make an action movie. Yes, there were action sequences. I think there kind of has to be. But I mean, let's talk about the plot of this thing. There's a mole in the CIA, and his whole team, in the midst of carrying out a mission, is gunned down, but they're gunned down and observed by another CIA team to try to figure out who the mole is, and they think it's Tom Cruise. And then Tom Cruise has to go about Ethan Hunt, and he has to go about uncovering who the real mole is in order to prove his innocence. Great. You'll notice that it was a pretty straightforward plot line. There weren't too many weird twists in it. It's a mystery, and with a mystery there has to be some degree of misdirection, but it's not the kind of constipated. So the FBI knew the CIA was setting them up with the kind of thing that I've complained about with other movies. It was just enough to keep the plot moving and keep you interested without it becoming retarded. Which is what I like.
But oh God, did the original cast hate it?
So let's talk about that, because you seem, you were telling me about this before the podcast started. So take the floor here. Explain to me what all went wrong with the cast and the plot and all of that.
So I find it kind of entertaining, in that when the movie was made, in particular, the three most outspoken people were Greg Morris, who played Barney Collier in the 66 to 73 original, Peter Graves, who played the original Jim Phelps, and Martin Landau, who played Roland Hand. All disliked the direction of the movie. In particular, the fact that they all, spoiler here, were adamantly against Jim Phelps, played by John Voight in the movie, being portrayed as a traitor, being portrayed as the ultimate string-pulling villain in the end. So much so that Peter Graves actually turned down the opportunity to play Phelps in the film. Landau really went on quite the tirade to MTV in 2009, and to be honest, I couldn't disagree with him. Well, I agree with him in part, but I also disagree with him quite handily. Said, quote, "When they were working on an early incarnation of the first one, not the script they ultimately did, they wanted the entire team to be destroyed, done away with one at a time, and I was against that. It was basically an action-adventure movie and not mission. Mission was a mind game. The ideal mission was getting in and getting out without anyone ever knowing we were there. So the whole texture changed. Why volunteer to essentially have our characters commit suicide? I passed on it." And then he also added, "The script wasn't that good either." Well, we have to chalk some of this up to the fact that if Grandpa Simpson is based on one real-life human being, it's probably Martin Landau. He notoriously loves to get his panties in a twist. But in this case, sorry, Marty, fuck you, you're wrong. This was a mind game. The first one was, anyway. I could see his point on the other three movies. I will give him that. But this one, as you pointed out, it really wasn't what the trailers and TV spots made it out to be. If you were to believe those, you would think the entire movie was like the wire infiltration at Langley and the train sequence. When really, overall, the entire movie is pretty low on the highfalutin action. There's those two sequences, and there's maybe the sequence in the restaurant, I'll grant you.
Oh, that's a conversation, and then he blows it up. I mean, I guess, but in the strictest definition of terms, sure, that's an action scene, but it's one action.
Well, right, exactly. But really, I'm not sure what movie Marty watched here, because a big part of the movie is, in fact, the team obsessing over how do we get in and get out without anybody knowing we were there.
And the thing of it is when it's a setup, when the plot of the movie rests upon the point that the whole team is being set up because one of them is a traitor, you can't do that. Then you don't have a movie if everyone gets in and gets out unscathed. But let's cut to the chase here. Martin Landau and everybody else who had a problem with this movie sour grapes, and I think it's a great example of something that you generally only see with comic book nerds, which is, wah, wah, it's not what I wanted, wah, it's not being true to the source material. Folks, go ahead and listen to Jeff Harris and I talk about the Wolverine after you're done with this podcast, because we talked at length about people need to get over this idea that the source material must be the Bible from which you're working through. Look, it would be nice, but that's not the way people in Hollywood act. I don't know how many more times I have to say this. When Hollywood folks get a hold of a property and decide they're going to put it on the big screen, they use the source material as a starting point, and then they can go any which way to it. Some stay more closely to it than others, but ultimately, a film is a film, a comic book is a comic book, a book is a book, and a television show is a television show. They're not the same mediums. You can't do them all the same way. You can't even do an animated film the same way you would do a live-action film. Enjoy the goddamn thing for what it is.
I would agree for the most part, except for the fact that when it comes particularly to certain adaptations of TV series, no, I'm sorry, particularly when you're dealing with nostalgia, you do owe a certain something to being true to the source material.
A certain something, but a certain something, Sean. But I think that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. And the point that I'm getting at is, I don't think the original crew of Mission Impossible has a leg to stand on. It's simply, it's not what I wanted.
And actually, to be perfectly honest, they might have updated the look of it, but I really don't think it was as defiant to the spirit of the original series as the original cast thinks it was. I mean, no, it's not going to look exactly like your show looked for the 7 years between the mid to late 60s to the early 70s. It's not, simply because it's just not the way anything is done anymore. However, they really did try to stay true to that spirit of it being a mind game, of it being a chess match.
Right.
They might have done it with more explosion. They might have done it with more special and practical effects.
Well, much like Texas, everything is always big on the bigger screen. Look, if these people are going to, if anyone's going to complain about Mission Impossible not being a spy movie or not being true enough to the source material, with the first movie, I don't think they have a leg to stand on. However, transitioning into Mission Impossible 2, oh boy. Now, I'm totally sympathetic to that argument. It doesn't matter. And I will go ahead and say right now, I actually enjoyed Mission Impossible 2 more than I enjoyed Mission Impossible 1. But, I'm a moron, I guess, because I also like Pacific Rim and movies where monsters destroy cities. So, different strokes and all of that. But, if you're going to say that the Mission Impossible movies failed to produce a spy movie, on the second one, you're 110% right.
Well,
okay, I didn't know if you had anything more to say. Why don't we let's any last words? Anything you wanted to talk about with the first Mission Impossible movie? Then I want to transition into the second one.
Well, yeah, and again, it's the fact that I got to speak on Tom Cruise here because this is his franchise. It's gotten to the point where 4 movies in, nobody can quite imagine a Mission Impossible movie starring anybody except Tom Cruise. Here's the unique thing about that, though, and that is the fact that there is really nothing particularly special about his performance. The stars of these movies, the ones who really make them, are inevitably the directors and how they apply their unique styles to this material, to this universe, to these characters, and how appealing the finished product ultimately ends up being. Because, I hate to say it, Cruise is one of those guys to where, and he can be enjoyable when handed the right material, but he himself, with a very few exceptions, I will even grant people Interview with the Vampire on this one, I can't think of too many roles that I've seen him in wherein I just go, I can't imagine anybody else doing this quite as well as Tom Cruise did. There's a precious few in a litany of movies that he's done. What it is it's the fact that in this first try at it, Brian De Palma brought a franchise that was really a product of its time into modernity, and he made it work with what was at the time an uncommon subtlety, a restraint, a sense of style, a sense of pacing, a sense of not needing, for the most part, to rely on explosions and necessarily grand spectacle. Cruise just happened to be kind of the right tool for the job, so to speak. It's kind of like the idea that you could put any kind of guitar in Eric Clapton's hands, from a top-of-the-line Stratocaster to a $100 introductory step-up model, or just introductory model that you happen to get from Walmart. And Clapton will still make Layla smoke as much on any sixth string you put in his hands because he's that much of an artist with it. On the other hand, the second movie, it's John Woo Bukkake. It is that stylized, slowed down, decadent action style, all up in your face practically every single minute of it. The third movie, I'm sure when I watch it, I'm going to look at it and go, yup, that was a J.J. Abrams movie.
Complete with lens flare.
It's Ghost Protocol that I'm most intrigued to see, just because you really can't necessarily pin one style down to Brad Bird. I mean, this is the guy who's best known for The Iron Giant and Toy Story, more than arguably any other movie. So, I mean, it's something to keep in mind through the rest of these. And with that in mind, let's talk about what was the difference maker for you with Mission Impossible 2.
Mission Impossible 2 is by no means a spy movie. Yes, there are odes to the Bond franchise. There are odes to what people think are spy movies, modern spy movies. I mean, this more resembled the Bourne franchise than it did Mission Impossible or anything else. I mean, basically, this was a John Woo action movie. Here's what I said to Sean before the podcast started. I said, I think in Hollywood what tends to happen is, as I've said before, these are not people who want to take a tremendous amount of risk. And a surefire way to make sure you make money on something is to slap a name on it that everybody recognizes. Because, what are people more likely to see? Ham Sandwich, which no one's ever heard before, who may or may not have an actor that you like, or Iron Man. Well, everyone knows what Iron Man is, comic book and all of that. So, yeah, more people go see Iron Man than a Ham Sandwich. And, yes, a lot of movies come out during the year. Not every one of them has a recognizable label to it. But by and large, when you're talking about summer blockbusters and movies that are set to offset, basically, something that's maybe artsier or something that they did take a chance with, because they're not totally in the business of making schlock. You want to go with a recognizable brand. So what ends up happening is you have screenwriters, honest to goodness, real human being screenwriters who write a movie, and production company, studio picks it up, and they say, okay, we're going to cross out Ham Sandwich, we're going to change some of the details here, and this is going to be Mission Impossible 2. We'll get Tom Cruise back, and that'll be that. And I feel like that's what, so to some degree or another, that's what happened with this movie. They decided that it was Mission Impossible because somebody decided that there was still money to make off the franchise. Despite the fact that it has nothing to do with anything about the Mission Impossible series or any of the themes from the first movie of the television show. What's up, Sean?
Well, congratulations, friendo. You just demonstrated that you were going to have the easiest time in the world understanding what's wrong with the Resident Evil franchise.
and take out spy and insert zombie?
Well, God knows when we get to that one, I am going to go straight gamer fanboy on it. And in fact, we may want to consider getting Sammerman on this one.
Okay. But do you see what I'm saying here? I having said that now, this is where I go back to my initial argument about sometimes you just got to enjoy something for what it is. And so stop being caught up in what you think a Mission Impossible movie is supposed to be or what it really should be, and just enjoy the fact that this is yet another Tom Cruise action vehicle directed by John Woo. And what a John Woo action movie it was starring Tom Cruise. My goodness. It has a few of my problems that turn me off of movies like this where, again, your lead is completely infallible. But I mean, in as far as visuals are concerned, watching as I said about the Avengers, watching a roller coaster simulator unfold before your eyes, it was a fun movie. It definitely captured my interest for the whole 123 minutes that it runs. I want to delve a little bit into the asinine love story that takes place and is really the anchor of this movie. But to give you a short answer, after this long explanation, I liked it. It wasn't Mission Impossible. It wasn't even close. But it was a John Woo action movie starring Tom Cruise called Mission Impossible, and I'm okay with that.
It was all right. I didn't hate it. What made it considerably less interesting for me is the fact that what I loved about the first one was that the hero of the movie was very clearly not the predator of it. He was trying to he was trying to stay out of custody. And that was what really made it most interesting all throughout. In this one, we have to kind of sit here and watch Cruise watch him be the hunter instead of the hunted. Hunted. And it's just not as entertaining. I'm just not as interested in that.
Well, the relationship he has with the love interest in this movie, who is played by Sandy Newton, Naya Nordoff Hall, who is a jewel thief who ends up being recruited because she used to sleep with the villain in the movie, and so she is going to be a double agent, an infiltrator. This is one of those things where somebody comes up with an idea, and they're like, okay, we got to get to this idea, and so everything is forced in order to get there and get the plot going. So let me just lay this out for people. He's told, go recruit this woman who is a thief. They do this whole sequence where you get to know her a little bit, and you get to see her in action, in which case she's made to be sort of a bumbler for the purposes of making her dependent on Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character. And then they go into this really asinine chase scene, which ends with her nearly dying and him having to save her, and she becomes all Florence Nightingale in reverse here. It was like Back to the it was Back to the Future where the mom falls in love with the son because she has to save him or take care of him or whatever, and it was supposed to be the father. In this case, she's like, I'll join you if you can catch me. And they proceed to have this chase in cars on the side of a cliff, which looks awesome, is in fact stupid, but it looks cool. And then, they ram cars. She goes flying out of the car. He's got to dive over the cliff to save her. And he pulls her into his lap, and she instantly falls in love with him. And her, which is even better, folks. So they sleep together, and then it's after they've slept together and now obviously are going to be mated for life. They are betrothed to one another, clearly, because Tom Cruise is deeply in love with this woman who is an idiot and, nearly died. And then they're told, oh, by the way, we don't want her because she's a jewel thief. We want her because she used to boss the villain. Like, oh, for Christ's sakes. It's one of those where, like, if you turn your brain off and just go, okay, what happens next? It's the old the Dom DeLuise from History of the World Part 1. Okay, faggot, what's next? Just lay back and let it happen. So that's what gets us to the point where now she has to be embedded with the bad guys, and the whole tension of the movie is, will she or won't she get caught? When will the villain figure out he's been had? And will she know that he knows? And it's the worst love triangle ever. But what I thought was really hilarious and weak was, again, Tom Cruise, who's supposed to be this, cold CIA, Mission Impossible spy, he's there for the mission, is not concerned that at some point there's going to be a biological viral outbreak that's going to kill millions of people possibly if he doesn't save the day. He's concerned that this poor tramp is going to get killed. Sure, Hollywood, give it to me. Like I said, this was action pornography. It looks awesome. It is stupid. But I'm okay with that.
This was the movie where the franchise really started trying to be Bond.
Modern Bond. I was going to say Pierce Brosnan era Bond.
Exactly. Because of course these movies came out right around the same time as the Brosnan era Bond movies, which managed to do reasonably well at the box office despite being horrendous. Except GoldenEye. GoldenEye was okay. But it's that thing that, and Hollywood is not the only entity that's guilty of doing it. Video game publishers do it. Authors, to a certain extent, do it. Musicians do it. Wow, that last thing we did was really, really fracking awesome. You know what would make it even better? Let's make a new movie and do exactly the opposite of everything we did.
What did we say in our last podcast? Our second to last podcast? More dinosaurs.
Yeah, and
I've got other people saying that now. I've got other people on other podcasts yelling out more dinosaurs. You're welcome.
I've often got these movies playing while we're doing these podcasts, and I happen to have Mission Impossible 2 on in front of me right now on mute, and I'm watching the roof infiltration scene, and they tried to make so much of this movie. That's exactly what happened. They saw how iconic the wire infiltration scene at Langley was in the first movie, and how that became somewhat representative of the entire movie to everybody. And they thought, okay, well, let's see what happens if we enlist this legendary Hong Kong action director who's made his name doing this kind of stylized circus, and just make the entire fucking movie like the Langley scene. Well, lo and behold, that's what they did, except they forgot the other reasons why the wire scene in the first movie worked so well, and that was everything that had been established before that. And that was, again, Ethan Hunt not being the predator, being the prey, trying to avoid getting caught, trying to avoid battle, trying to avoid confrontation, trying, albeit sometimes pretty unsuccessfully, to be as relatively subtle as he possibly can and unintrusive with his infiltration, and leaving as few signs as possible that he's been there. Whereas, on the other hand, it's a sequel, so of course we have to do everything bigger, and it just ends up being dumber.
More dinosaurs.
More dinosaurs, yeah, exactly. There's a reason why it was so awesome when Saban suplexed the train. It was because the entire game wasn't Saban suplexing trains. The action actually meant something. It stood out for that reason. And actually, the whole thing about the first movie was the fact that unfortunately, people went into it thinking that it was going to be, that the entire movie was going to be like that one scene, because that was the one that was splashed all over the promo materials. Whereas,
I want to say two things with regards to that, and they're going to be a little off the beaten path, but stay with me here.
On this show, you don't fucking say.
Yeah, we are so always on point. We're like prosecuting attorneys. Now listen, shut up a minute. Let me talk. Sorry. Pacific Rim came in third to Despicable Me 2 and Grown Ups 2. Despicable Me 2 is forgivable. Grown Ups 2 is the reason why we can't have nice things in America. And and I remember, and I'm totally ripping off our good friend of the podcast, one of the three beards, Mr. Robert Cooper. That was his line when it came out that Pacific Rim, which was an awesome movie, came in third to Grown Ups 2, which came in second for that weekend. He said, "This is why we can't have nice things." Because, and what he's alluding to is that they went out of their way to make a great monster fights a robot movie, gave it a lot of layers and definition, and it looked good, and there weren't, a whole lot of complaints about it. You can check out my podcast review with Jeff Harris online to hear us just rave about what was clearly the best movie of the summer. And it comes in third. It did well at the box office, but not as well as I think the studio had expected. And in cases like this, they're not likely to want to continue to do movies like that because they don't think people want to go see them, and that's unfortunate. And so, you look at a movie like Mission Impossible.
You want to know the one reason why I have seen Grown Ups?
Because your wife made you go? Oh wait, that's me.
Yeah, let's contrast this once more against how very, very single Sean is.
Aw.
Well, fuck a duck. The actual reason why I have seen it was because the only reason, and I swear I loved this drive-through where I used to live back in Kansas City, but at the same time, a pox on his house, was because it was a package deal. I had to see Grown Ups in order to get to see Inception.
I think in both cases you just should have skipped going to the movies and gone bowling instead. But the reason why I brought all of that up was, in the case of Mission Impossible, it's because of the taste of the general movie audience. And I said this at the beginning of the podcast. You have to weigh trying to create a product that is good with with what's going to reach the lowest common denominator, and it's called the lowest common denominator for a reason. If you appeal to a niche audience, you're going to get niche receipts, and you better hope the whole niche goes, or your movie's going to bomb. And they're not these aren't terrorist organizations. Oddly enough, they're not in the business of making bombs. So, with the Mission Impossible movie, I think they looked at the first one and said, we can do better, we can do bigger. If we throw out all the stuff that makes this an original spy movie and just make it a big action movie, more people will come to see it. Which is why we can't have nice things in America, and instead, we have plastic things. But I want to also connect this to something else, and it only mildly relates, but I must talk about it because I must. I've been watching a lot of Screen Junkies honest trailers. I watched them all, actually, over the weekend, and I had seen some here or there when they come up on my YouTube feed. But I made it a point to watch every single one of them this past weekend, and I watched the one for The Dark Knight Rises. And at one point, the epic narrator says, he was talking about Independence Day. We all know Independence Day is basically War of the Worlds. But the big feature of Independence Day was watching giant spaceships blow up landmarks, like the White House, which was awesome. It was why I went to go see the movie, and I don't regret it to this day, no matter how stupid the movie was. But I remember the narrator saying something to the effect of, harken back to a time when summer blockbusters were lighthearted and fun and not all dark and Nolan-y. At which point they flash to The Dark Knight Rises as Batman is punching Bane in the face going, "Where is the trigger? Where is it?" And on the floor. I mean, I was doing that the rest of the day. My wife would say, "Can you take out the garbage?" I would grab her by the shoulder and go, "Where is the trigger?" Lily walks in the room. Dada, watch Tink Bell now. Where is the trigger? No, Dada.
My God, you must have terrified Lily with that.
I terrified everybody that came within 5 feet of me. But the loose point that I'm trying to make with this rant is that I think you have to try and remember that the movie here is trying to have fun with the audience, and it's trying to be fun. And if you nitpick it too much, if you start, peeling back all of these layers and going, wait a minute, this is caca, you're going to miss out on what the point of the movie was, and that was to have fun. Have fun watching Tom Cruise fight an army of terrorists in order to save a woman he barely knows. Sure, why not?
Touche to a certain extent, but my counter to that is that I didn't hate Mission Impossible 2. It's just that I have varying levels of enjoyment when it comes to movies. And if I'm to place these two relatively, no, I didn't really enjoy this as much as I enjoyed the first one. Because I enjoyed the first one for much the same reason that I enjoyed a heist movie like The Score, which, by the way, little trivia for you, is arguably one of my 10 all-time favorite movies. And that's because it's a rare treat to get to watch a kind of thriller like that they quite literally don't make anymore. You see movies like that so rarely compared to how often you see a movie like Mission Impossible 2 or Wanted or Salt or any number of other movies. Because they're able to do so much more and be so intriguing with restraint by pulling the action back a little bit and actually making the big splashy sequences really mean something. And how even when they do those sequences, they're fun to watch.
Restraint? Yeah. What are you, some kind of communist?
Das Vidania, motherfucker. You're able to enjoy them in part because it's not quite as Michael Bay, Jerry Bruckheimer intense. You can see that scenes like the Wire scene were shot with a whole lot of care. That everything was very, very meticulous. It was very plotted out. And allow me to give Mission Impossible 2 its due. I love the final action sequence in this movie. I love the final gun sequence because that is just, it's signature John Woo. It is, he and Tom Cruise just aping hard-boiled about as closely as they possibly can. But it just doesn't mean as much when the entire movie is like that. So I enjoyed it. It was fun. But I have a lot more fun sitting back and watching movies that have some character, that have some downtime for me to catch my breath between the action sequences.
Yeah, there is no character development in this movie. There is absolutely no depth, no character development. Tom Cruise is the same at the beginning of this movie as he is at the end. And as I said, the love interest between him and Naya is so forced it almost resembles rape. That's how forced it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of the fun of the first one was it's not like that exactly had a whole lot of character development, but you at least get to see a bit of a shift when Ethan Hunt realizes that he's been betrayed, when he starts really piecing everything together. I particularly love that scene where he's sitting at the table with Jim Phelps, John Boyd, and as Hunt is kind of stringing Phelps along with the idea that not Kissinger. I'm trying to remember what his name is now. Hang on. I feel the compulsive need to actually look up this character.
I'll look it up. Keep going.
Yeah. Kittredge, that's it. When you see him kind of playing into Jim's con that Kittredge was the one who was responsible for the double cross. And all throughout, you got Boyd playing his reactions against the actual truth of how it really played out. That one by one, Claire and Jim Phelps were responsible for the exterminations. I love that. That's beautiful. I love watching that as much as I love watching the scenes between, say, Robert De Niro and Edward Norton, or Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando in The Score, because it's actors acting, playing with something that's more than just the dialogue. And it's just not something you really get a quiet moment to see in MI2. I mean, this was back when ads loved to play up movies as the non-stop action thrill ride of the summer, as if that was a good thing. There's a benefit to having some time to stop and catch your breath, to having some pacing, because that way you're jolted again when the bangs and the booms and the bang comes up once more. Otherwise, you're just left exhausted by the time the final reel rolls around.
Yep, just like the Avengers.
Yeah, actually. That's really one of the reasons why I'm coming to really like Marvel storytelling, or not Marvel, DC storytelling, as much as, if not more than, I like some of the Marvel movies.
Where is the trigger, Sean? Where is it?
Fuck you, Nolan. Fuck you so hard.
I hope that Long Road to Ruin catches on with enough people that I get everyone repeating lines that I'm now stealing from other movies as Long Road to Ruin catchphrases. We need to go on whatever the name of the website is where you can make your own T-shirts and stuff. Something about coffee, I think.
Cafe Press.
Yeah, Cafe Press, and and we need to make a More Dinosaurs and a Where Is the Trigger T-shirt.
You know what? Actually, that's not a bad idea. I am laying this out right now. If we get 200 likes on the Long Road to Ruin Facebook page. Okay, one of two things. Would we either have 2 episodes in a row go over 1,000 downloads, or if we get over 100 likes on the Facebook page, then I think we should consider maybe putting feelers out to do the T-shirts. Because also, damn it, I want a Saban Suplex to Training shirt. Either that or one of my mini artistic licenses with the F-bomb.
Let's start bringing this to a close here. I want to talk about this real briefly. One of the things about Mission Impossible 2 is there's a very subtle for this movie, which is kind of like, subtle is the equivalent in this movie of a child setting off a firecracker and blowing off his hand. But I digress. There's a very subtle self-referential parody moment in this movie. We talked about it earlier, and that is when, in discussing the infiltration into the building via the ceiling, the roof, you have the villain talking about how, just sort of doing a psychological evaluation of Ethan Hunt and saying, everything that we talked about before, that he doesn't like confrontation, and at one point he goes, he'll do something acrobatical.
It's the aerobatic insanity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to stop the movie because I had to catch my breath laughing at that. It was a really, really funny thing because, like I said, it was one of those moments where it was a wink to the audience. I think a purposeful wink to the audience. It also showed a bit of disdain for it. And it was an odd moment for me in that respect, where I don't know if it was done intentionally or what, but the writers kind of gave that one to the villain as if to say, aren't we all a little tired of this sort of thing? I mean, honestly, instead of doing what some others did, walk through the front door and shoot everything that moves. This guy wants to do, Mary Lou Retton the spy routine, and I don't know. I thought it was hilarious.
Another thing I keep coming back to, and by the way, folks, if you didn't catch the previous Metal Hammer of Doom podcast, in which Mark and Robert and Sean Garmer talked about the new Black Sabbath album, by all means, when this is over, go do it, because what I heard was outstanding. You kind of made a point on that podcast, as I remember it, about how listening to certain songs on certain Black Sabbath albums, I'm being incredibly vague here because I kind of want you to maybe rehash this for me. Listening to certain songs on certain Black Sabbath albums leads to mistaken impressions of what Black Sabbath is all about, to the band's true identity. That, to me, kind of speaks volumes about both Mission Impossible and Mission Impossible 2. Mission Impossible, if you watch the trailers for that, and you saw the train scene and the wire scene and how much those were played up, you would think that was what the entire movie was like. You would have about the same impression as what Martin Landau apparently mistakenly had. And you would not be completely right. In fact, you'd be very much in the wrong in that those are very isolated parts of a 2-hour movie. On the other hand, if you watch the trailers for Mission Impossible 2, everything you see there, the movie is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a crunchy fucking frog that explodes in your mouth in slow motion with ample 360-degree camera pans and slowdowns, which sounds kind of awesome. Geez, now I just want to explode. Now I just want to make crunchy frogs blow up. But
I can't believe you liked "I Disappear." That has got to be one of Metallica's worst songs.
It's a guilty pleasure. It's
do you not like metal?
Hear me out. Metal is not my specialty, but
okay.
As I noted in the premiere edition of Give Life Back to Music, I draw a line between best and favorite. The comparison that I made, in my opinion, stands. Arguably the greatest Hell in a Cell match WWE has ever produced, far and away, always has been, probably always will be, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker.
Sure.
Easily. No contest whatsoever. Nobody in their right mind who has been a long-time wrestling fan who has seen several Hell in a Cell matches would argue that. On the other hand, I can't really say that it's my favorite Hell in a Cell match. My favorite Hell in a Cell match is The Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. And I could sit here and probably kill the next 20 minutes we've got remaining live on the air explaining why. But the simple fact is, that doesn't mean that I dislike the Shawn and Undertaker match. It just means that of the two, the other one is the one that I prefer to watch. Well, so it goes.
To link it to like Star Wars, I like Revenge of the Sith. It's not the best Star Wars movie.
Right.
So who cares?
And so it goes with Metallica. I could name Battery, The Unforgiven, One, Enter Sandman, Call of Cthulhu, any number of Metallica tunes that are better than I Disappear. However, I like I Disappear. I I happen to like it. It happens to be one of my favorite Metallica songs to listen to. And in a way that, again, it kind of sums up my feeling towards these two movies. I think that as we go along, I'm sorry, am I boring you?
I swear to God, I was trying to hide that from the mic. I apologize. And no, you are not boring me. I'm listening intently. I started off this podcast forgetting what podcast I was doing. You'll have to forgive me 1,000 pardons.
Seriously? Thank God you didn't mistakenly call me Jeff Harris at some point.
Poor bastard.
Hey, closest I'm getting to making fun of him. I made a promise. And that's kind of how I feel towards these movies, is I keep seeing reviews of people saying they feel that that Mission Impossible 3 and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol are two of the best movies in the series. And
they probably are.
Well, right, and they might be right, and they might not. Considering the fact that they seem to have impressive casts, each of them, and the fact they're directed respectively by J.J. Abrams and Brad Bird, two of my favorite filmmakers, I could see why people would feel that way. However, just given my preference and my appreciation for what is a bygone style and a bygone appreciation for the art of creating tension, I got to say that the first Mission Impossible is always going to be my favorite movie. I enjoyed 2 because, don't get me wrong, when I make fun of the whole John Woo thing, I love John Woo. And I think there are few action directors that are more enjoyable to watch. However, again, levels of enjoyment. It just so happens that I happen to enjoy watching the first one for reasons that are kind of much closer to my appreciation as a movie fan. So,
I think you can best sum up these movies, which if you want to watch a spy movie, something that at least closely resembles, as close as you're going to get in modern cinema, the old Mission Impossible TV show, for whatever your reasons are, go ahead and watch the first Mission Impossible. I don't think you'll be disappointed. You're not going to find much in the way of character development. You're certainly not going to see the most stellar filmmaking ever captured on celluloid. But I think it's a good fun spy movie, and it's a modern thinking man's movie, which is kind of the equivalent of saying you're reading at a 5th grade level and you're actually in the 5th grade. However, Mission Impossible 2 is a Mission Impossible movie in name only. And, maybe some people are going to see, like, wow, when did Radulich become the apologist for shitty movies or whatever? Look, I'll take that badge. I don't really care. But I think I'm a realist when it comes to this. I've taken Hollywood's measure and, you can either you can either be the goth kids from South Park and be like, everything's, God, there's a real big fish song. I know everything sucks. Yeah, I know everything sucks. Whoa, you want to be that guy, fine, but you're gonna go through life not having any fun, and that is the best way for me to describe Mission Impossible 2. Turn your brain off, have some fun. I mean, if you're going to sit there and argue to me that everyone should smoke pot, I don't see why you can't watch Mission Impossible 2. Yes, I just said Mission Impossible 2 is the equivalent of smoking pot.
No, that's not what I'm laughing at. Because I've had the movie on mute in front of me, and just as you were sitting here extolling the virtues of Mission Impossible 2, I get to the shot where, what's his name, the antagonist of the movie, just blew open the door in a massive fireball. And after it zooms in on his panicked expression, it zooms back to the door. And there it is fucking again. A fucking white dove comes slowly flapping out of the doorway. And out walks Tom Cruise in slow motion behind it.
Yep.
It's so the most ridiculous piece of shit ego trip shot I have ever seen in a movie. And they just showed another shot where there he is, hanging in these pipes above a doorway, and there, perched right next to him, is the goddamn dove. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure that is aping another John Woo movie. I'm positive.
You gonna be all right there, pal?
Oh, dear God, Tommy, how much were you compensating for with that one?
Well, isn't that the story of all of these Mission Impossible movies? Is, you know, Tom Cruise is approximately 3 feet tall, so they have to make him able to woo any woman, you know, and take on any number of bad guys in order to compensate.
You foppish fucking hobbit, my God. You must be like 2.5 inches hard to have wedged that shot in there.
All right. So, Mission Impossible 3 and 4 in 2 weeks, right?
What the fuck, Evs?
If anyone ever wondered what a Long Road to Ruin sounds like when me and Sean phone it in, it sounds like this, folks.
No, we're doing the best we can. We're doing this on 2 days' notice. Normally, we've had a couple of weeks to watch the movies at least once, maybe twice if we're really feeling like it. But yeah, in this case, you can blame me if this one is a little bit subpar, because Mark gave me the option to put this off so we can maybe do a better show down the line. I insisted, no, I don't want to cancel. I don't want to cancel the show. So we went ahead and just put together what we could, watching a couple of movies in 2 days.
I promise. I'm not going to promise the next one's going to be any better, because it's still Mission Impossible 3 and then Ghost Protocol. But I will tell you that regardless of whether or not we get the Transformers, in the pipeline coming up very soon is Aliens, Predator, Aliens versus Predator, and hopefully Rambo. All 4 Rambo movies. And boy, if there's anything I know in this world, it's the Rambo movies. So, you know, just as we do with every one of these shows, we can tell you what's going on in the very near future. You've got that to look forward to. So, I mean, enjoy this episode. Enjoy the next episode for us trying to figure out what in the hell to talk about with these movies, other than Tom Cruise compensating for his small genitalia. Maybe next episode we'll play excerpts from the Stuck in a Closet episode of South Park. Well, one never knows. But
we have to. But
definitely, as the weeks pour on and we start getting into the Aliens and Predator series, you know, then we'll be able to dig deep and talk a lot about those movies and give you the Long Road to Ruin that we started off with, because those movies I know very well and I have seen hundreds of times, as I'm sure has Sean. With maybe the possible exception of Rambo, but those are some of my favorite movies ever. So I mean, you know, I could do a 2-hour podcast by myself on just First Blood. So having said that, Sean, your plug, sir.
Yes, sir. Coming up late Sunday night / more likely Monday for most of you, we have got the second and true kickoff edition of Give Life Back to Music, in which I start off a planned 3 or 4 week Kanye West retrospective by taking a good long look at one of my all-time favorite albums of any genre, and that is The College Dropout. In my opinion, not a single bad track to be found, and it is a bona fide modern classic. So be sure and tune in for that. Coming up circa August 7th, though, something else that I am arguably even more excited about is the fact that I will be premiering a brand new podcast on another site. Sam Arcady and I will be, starting August probably 7th or 8th, premiering our brand new podcast, The Lost Weekend, on SaveContinue.com. It is going to be, if you like Long Road to Ruin and the way we talk about movies, it's going to be much the same way, except that's the way we're going to be talking about our favorite video games, starting with a discussion of what does and does not a great tournament fighter game make based on our respective experiences playing the wildly successful Injustice, Gods Among Us. Coming up whenever Jeremy Lambert and I can get around to rescheduling it, which, as I said, I'm in no hurry. I want him to take care of business first. We are going to have the next edition of Bad Movie Review Club, which is going to be Steven Seagal fighting the vampires in Against the Night. Why? Because I couldn't find Belly of the Beast, which includes him backhand Ric Flair chopping a guy across a room like he'd been shot out of a cannon. And otherwise, get thee over also to the Long Road to Ruin Facebook page, because I am now seriously thinking about if we push the likes up into 3 digits, we actually do perhaps a limited line of T-shirts for sale.
More dinosaurs. I will be wearing my More Dinosaurs T-shirt with pride.
I may have to. I don't know. We have to come up with one for each of us, and I'm not sure if mine should be, again, playing up my various and sundry variations on the F-bomb, or perhaps just throwing something out there such as Saban suplexed a train. I'm hesitant to do Never Dull Your Colors for someone else's canvas, because that's also the slogan for my non-entertainment-related business. So,
okay. Check out the Radulich and Broadcasting Network on iTunes. Rate us 5 stars. All the various and sundry shows we've got there. Of course, as I alluded to accidentally at the beginning of this podcast, you have the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, which is live every Sunday night at 9 o'clock, except on the odd show where there's a wrestling pay-per-view that I actually want to watch and not be distracted by having to do a podcast. In addition to that, we have the Metal Hammer of Doom podcast, which features myself and Robert Cooper reviewing metal albums. We recently did Black Sabbath. We did Super Collider from Megadeth, and we did a Megadeth career retrospective. You could go back deep in the archives. We've done everything from Hatebreed to Tomahawk. This Tuesday, a week from tonight, we will be reviewing one of my favorite bands and a band that I'm seeing live tomorrow at Rockstar Mayhem, Children of Bodom, their new album, Halo of Blood. So give that a whirl. Tuesday night, same time as the Long Road to Ruin. Long Road to Ruin will be back in 2 weeks. We'll be looking at, again, Mission Impossible 3 and Ghost Protocol. Then we'll figure out what we're going to do after that. Also, check out Jeff Harris and I having a relatively civil conversation about this summer's blockbuster series. We've covered Iron Man 3, Man of Steel, The Lone Ranger, Pacific Rim. We're going to go on a bit of a hiatus. We're going to do The World's End, which is the new Simon Pegg comedy. You know, the guy that brought us Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. We're going to do that one, and then we're going to take a break until Thor: The Dark World comes out. So go ahead and give those a check. Good podcast. If you like Jeff Harris on the 401 Ground and Pound show, you'll love him talking about movies. Also, this last one where we did the Wolverine, he talked a little bit about Comic-Con, and we discussed what I'm going to call the world's finest movie until they decide to call it something else, and The Age of Ultron, which were both announced at Comic-Con, plus his other Comic-Con experiences, which I'm sure none of which involved touching a woman.
I'll have to ask, were you a little bit let down that Ultron was the villain they went with for the Avengers?
No, I'm fine with it. I'm let down that Josh Whedon has already shot down doing the... is this Josh Whedon? Has already said that they're not going to do a Planet Hulk movie, which I think is stupid. So I think, Phase 3 or Phase 4, the Avengers movie needs to be Planet Hulk, or everybody is a communist.
You know what? I'd like it, and I'm hesitant
not
to call
Planet Hulk, World War Hulk. World War Hulk. I think they've said they don't want to do a Planet Hulk movie, and they don't want to do a World War Hulk, and I think these people are ridiculous.
You know, the thing is where I think Disney is going to get gun-shy about that, and I feel we can talk about this pretty appropriately here because, after all, we're talking about a franchise, is the fact that Disney has now twice in very short order, even if one of them was not necessarily a bad movie, they've been pretty badly burned on movies that cost a metric fuck ton to get made and didn't end up making anything near their budget back. Or correction, they maybe made their budget back.
You talking about like the Lone Ranger?
I'm talking about both the Lone Ranger and John Carter. I mean, they might have made their budgets back, but they didn't give nearly the return on investment that maybe Disney hoped. Now, I know we're talking about the Avengers here and one of the highest grossing movies of all time, but I mean, I gotta think that to really do World War Hulk or Planet Hulk on a scale that would really be appropriate to the story, it would be so damn expensive that I'm not sure they would get
if you get the actors to take scale, the only thing then you're talking about is filming the Hulk wrecking a city and beating people up.
Okay, I will agree. I will agree with you on that one. I will agree with you there. I'm not going to say that it wouldn't be good. Jeff has tried to make that argument a few times, and I respectfully disagree with him. I think it's entirely possible to do a good character-driven Hulk movie that also has all the thrills and special effects you could want.
Hang on. Let me say it this way. You do a Planet Hulk movie where he's exiled for destroying Las Vegas, goes to a planet, has to find the hero within in order to save a band of rebels from an evil king, then kills said evil king, marries the princess, only to have the princess blowed up by one of his followers who is in fact a traitor, and then takes that anger with him back to Earth, where he wrecks every superhero in sight out of anger, only to find out it wasn't the superheroes that did him in the first place, and he voluntarily surrenders. That's not a movie. That's an opera. And as long as you can get the actors to take scale, and you created enough CG, Jurassic Park era CGI and not Phantom Menace CGI, you will have your money back guaranteed.
Well, hey, I'm on board with you. I'm totally on board with you. I would love to see that. I believe that that's a quality enough movie. The only trick, and you've mentioned it, I think 3 times now, is you've got to talk everybody into taking scale for it, especially if we're talking about not just a Hulk movie, but an Avengers movie, to where you got to talk that whole cast into taking a major pay cut to get it made. You're going to have to make some serious deals for percentages on the potential gross on that to get them on board. And even then, they're probably going to see it as being a real gamble, and you're going to have to really bank on them doing it just because they really love this franchise.
Right, and that's a lot of ifs and buts, candy and nuts. In the interest of time, we gotta cut this short. But it's one of these days, separately from Long Road to Ruin, which is about movie franchises that actually exist instead of ones that are us just fanboying out. I really would like to just sit and talk potential comic book movies. Jeff and I did a little bit of that. We talked about, you would ask your initial question, and I'm going to answer you this way. I'm going to answer you in the way that I was trying to answer Jeff last night, but, Jeff and I are Rocky and Drago at times. Just, both of us just beating each other about the head. If they do the Age of Ultron this way, in that Tony Stark has given up the Iron Man gig. He has decided to stop doing Iron Man armor, and he's moved on to other things. And he decides that he's going to build robots. And he's going to build robots that that are not just weapons, but do all kinds of things. And he's the one that's responsible, because they're not doing the Ant-Man origin of Ultron, which Jeff went into this whole thing about. By God, that's an integral part of his character. Who the fuck cares? I don't need to say it a 40 billionth time about source material. So let me just skip ahead and say they'll come up with something else that's an integral part of Hank Pym's character. I don't care. That being said, if you do it where Tony Stark is responsible for creating Ultron, and Ultron then does what he does, it becomes self-aware. It becomes essentially Skynet, and goes on a rampage and starts killing people. And he's the one responsible for creating the Vision, which allegedly is being played by Vin Diesel, which I think is hilarious. And then then he has to don the Iron Man armor again because he was responsible for creating Frankenstein's monster. Fine, I'm sold. That's a perfectly plausible plot for the Age of Ultron and for getting the Avengers back together again. Because the unfortunate thing about the way the Avengers ended was everyone went their own separate ways, and the parting line of the movie is, how will we get them back together? They'll come back together because they have to, which means you have to create a sufficient enough reason to draw back, Earth's mightiest heroes from the four corners of the earth. If you create, if Tony Stark is responsible for creating a Frankenstein monster that goes on a rampage and it's too much for him to even deal with, one, you've already solved the problem of having to draw him out of retirement. Two, you've now drawn out a reason why you need to bring all these other people back in because Ultron's too much for him. Perfect.
Well, I guess you can maybe kind of chalk a little bit of my ambivalence up also to the fact that I got to admit, lately I've become a DC convert.
Mm-hmm.
I really have. Don't get me wrong. I still love Marvel, but I become much more fascinated with the big scope of the DC universe. So maybe it's just that my attention is kind of elsewhere, and my continued hope that maybe eventually, somewhere in the process between the next Superman movie and the eventual Justice League movie, that I will finally maybe get to see a Marvel movie that features Darkseid.
Lots of luck.
God, I don't think it's nearly as hard as a lot of people think it would be.
I think it's hard. It just, sometimes you have to wonder, they buy these properties and all the characters included, and they seem to forget that they exist. But, hey, we do need to wrap. So, like I was saying, check out the Radulich and Broadcasting Network and all of the shows on iTunes. Rate us 5 stars. You can also check us out on Stitcher. I'm very happy that that we finally got on Stitcher, another platform for people to listen to our shows. And
wait. I got one more.
Yep.
And also, do not forget to check out not only our podcast, but all the other many great podcast blogs and videos over on the house that the That Guy with the Glasses blogs built, manicexpression.com.
Yes. You can check out all of our latest podcasts there as well. All right. So, hope you've enjoyed our mini discussion of Marvel. Yeah, what I was saying about that was just really quickly, and then I'm hitting the button. We should at some point figure out a way that we can do kind of a Mark and Sean talking potential comic book movies kind of conversation, because I do find this stuff interesting, and as anyone who's heard me on the Casual Heroes, which you can hear me on any given week, or I'm on their WrestleCast or their movie cast or whatever, their MMA cast. I like the fantasy book stuff. I think I'm pretty creative. I think I got a good handle on these things, and I like to gather other people's thoughts on what would make a good movie. So hopefully we'll offline we'll work that out and see what we can jam into the old network here. But for now, thank you for joining us on Long Road to Ruin. For Sean Comer, be well, be safe, and behave.